So, Mr. Payne, my name is Mike Smith. Today's date is 1 May 2025. We're at Auburn University, and I am interviewing Mr. Wilbert Payne.
Wilbert D. Payne Jr.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Payne, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Payne. We'll start off just with some background information. Could you just talk to me about where you were born, and where you grew up at, and some of your early childhood memories?
I grew up I was born in Lee County, Alabama. Lee County, Opelika area. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And I grew up also here in Lee County in the projects. They call them now the affordable housing. I grew up there, and I learned what the valuable things. I was raised primarily by my mother, and she gave us the best life she can give us during that time frame. And I also went to school, elementary school here in this area, and through high school, elementary through high school here, in a predominant black school. hmm And also, I was played football when I was in junior high and high school, football. And I enjoy going to school. I enjoy the teachers, and the teachers then, they was different from the teacher today. They wanted you to learn. That's where they go to get you to learn. The teachers nowadays in time, I feel like they're not interested in the kid being successful. All they interested in trying to make 8 hours.
What year were you born here in Lee
I was
County?
born in 1950.
And growing up in the Opelika area in the 1950s and early 1960s, you said you were raised primarily by your mother. Did you have any sisters and
Sister
brothers?
and brother. I had a sister and a brother. A sister older than me, a brother younger than me. I'm the middle child.
And you made reference to the middle school and the high school you went to. What schools were those?
I went to Carvey Elementary School, which has been renovated over the years. Is still standing in Opelika. It's being utilized as a elementary school. And from there, I went to Carvey Elementary School till I was in the 7th grade. And from there, I went to high school from the 8th to the 12th. I was in high school, the Darwin High School, which is a historic site now. The school's still being utilized today as a Head Start, operated by the state as a Head Start for school.
During your time at Darden High School, was it a segregated high school?
It was just a predominantly black school.
Just a predominantly black.
But integration came through. I graduated in 69. Integration came through the school back in 67 and 68. That's when the children had an opportunity to start going to integrated school, to the high school, which was Opelika High. They had the opportunity to go on, and then the year after I graduated, the children had to one more year, I believe, and then they had to, in 70, after 1970, the kid had to make a choice to go to, they didn't have no other choice but to go to predominantly integrated school. in the neighborhood in Opelika was Opelika High, and then they used the Darden School for Southside campus. It was maybe vocational, and if you want another trade or something, but if you wanted to more academic to and play sports and stuff like that, and you went to Opelika High.
And what year did you graduate high school?
1969.
And you mentioned you played football in high school, and you talked a little bit about athletics.
You're right.
Did you play any other sports in high school, and were you always interested in sports and competing?
Yes, I always just more so focused on football, but I have played satellite basketball, stuff like that, and flag football and stuff like that growing up. But my focus was football team, and I was planning to go there after high school, Alabama A&M, in Huntsville. But I got drafted in 11th grade. I believe I got the letter that summer, and I had to go to the military. I got caught in the draft lottery.
Going to high school in the later part of the 1960s with Vietnam kind of going on, heating up, if you can say. Do you remember thinking about that before you got your draft notice? Was that a concern?
Well, basically, it wasn't no concern, cause I felt like I seen guys go into the military, but they brought the draft lottery back, and that's what put my focus there and be on the military. Then I said then at that time I'd probably go to Fort Benning for right down the road there for training. But lo and behold, they changed that training and sent it to Fort Bragg. That training, the basic training changed a little before I went in, and they were sending them all to Fort Jackson and everywhere, and they sent me to Fort Bragg for basic training back there during that time frame.
Do you remember any feelings you got when you got your draft notice?
Well, I was young, and that helped me made up my mind what I was gonna do. I know I was number one before I do anything else. I was had to serve my obligation to the military, and young, and you don't be thinking that much. You just helped me made up my mind to get to the next level.
So you got your draft notice senior year of high school in 1969, and you joined the Army right after high school?
I went in, yes, after high school.
And tell us a little bit about your experiences leaving home, going into basic training, and just, I guess, jumping right into your military service a little bit. You did basic training at Fort Bragg.
Right.
How was that?
Well, lo and behold, my military training, keep in mind now, Vietnam been going on for a few years in 1969. So the training center there at Fort, when I look back at it, the training center there at Fort Bragg was set up. It was set up to, let me get the word, I'm trying to find the exact word to use for this. They focused there was to get your mind set for Vietnam. Lo and behold, they knew the group that I was coming through was going to Vietnam in basic training. And so what their job was to get you focused there in that. Everything that we went through at Fort Bragg in training, 90% of the training is on the outside. They do not deviate from that. And so being there in February of 70, the only thing they are going to offer you for that training is some long johns to put on up under that cover. It's cold at Fort Bragg, real cold. And they offer you that. But their mindset was to get you acclimatized, get your mindset, focus, program you, that's the word, for Vietnam. That's what they did. The military, I'm gonna tell my story. Their mindset was to get your mindset program for Vietnam. And they did a good job with me and the group that went through. So when I went through all my training, I was focused, and I was paying a very close attention. It was different than any other training that I went through and before I got to the military. Like when I went through training, when I first started in high school football, that was I had to study that training there because I kept mind on it. But when I got to the military, that was different. You had to stay focused because there, like John Doe grave, he didn't pay attention. They always referred to people that didn't pay attention to the instruction when we was in the basic training and what can possibly happen to you if you're in a comeback situation. And so they did a good job there. They focused there, the music and stuff. It was just like you sense of mind in Vietnam. But this information and training was gathered and sent back to Fort Bragg from people that done experienced that in Vietnam and said they don't want the other soldiers coming to replacement. That's what you is in Vietnam, a replacement. They didn't want you to make the same mistake that the other guys that went before you. So that's why they kept our mindset program for this specific mission. And I thank God that I went through it, and my mother asked me when I came home after basic training. I went through AIT, and I got a chance to get a break in a few weeks to come home for about 48 hours or so. And my mother asked me one of the questions. First off, she was glad to see me, and the second she asked me, said, I let her know that I was possibly going to Vietnam, that I was going to Vietnam, because I knew. And she said, ain't you scared? I didn't take time to think about whether I was scared. All I know, my mindset programmed that for that mission. I didn't think about being scared at that time frame, when at my age of being scared. But I came home, I pulled the uniform off, I was relaxed. Then when I put the uniform back on, just like that uniform would make energized to be ready for what's coming up next. And so when I got to Vietnam, after all the training, extensive training, the first thing, we had something like about 20 some hours of flight time to Vietnam. And the first thing that when we landed there in Ben Y, and the first thing, they were bombing their landing strip. So when we was there, the first thing they done when we were getting off the plane was having us M16, our weapon, hand it to you right after that. Then in my orders there, it said travel. That means that I was going up south from there. Been while I was down south, I was going up south. I was going on the coast there. We flew on the coast there. I went up to Da Nang, and that's where I was at the whole duration there, and the name. I was at 807 Transportation, and it was a logistic. We fell up under the first logistic command, logistical command there. And what our job, mainly we had 50-foot towers all around the compound. We pulled guard duty. Sometimes the enemy will be walking the rockets in, what I call it. They'll be walking the rockets in and stuff, and then you have to run to your bunker at a certain time. I I don't know what getting a solid good night's sleep was. That's what on none of our mind there. Well, our mind set was to try to stay alive. You know, you slept with pretty much with ready to go at all time, ready to move all the time in Vietnam.
Mr. Payne, when you first arrived to Vietnam and you moved up to Da Nang, do you remember what you were thinking?
I always had survival cause you wasn't with you didn't have a partner, you're a replacement in Vietnam, first of all. You with people you don't know. And you got to get to know them eventually, and survival skills in hand, and learning the system of survival, and everything that I learned at Fort Bragg, that through basic. See, again, let me reflect back on that. Everything they taught you, everything at during that time frame in basic infantry, everything you need to know about the military. Your background was infantry. Everybody that went through Fort Bragg, I can speak only for Fort Bragg because that's why I went through. Everybody went through it. They had a background of interest, infantry. Your weapons and stuff. You know the formations, the infantry, and then you branch off into other areas of the military. But your background was interest during that time frame.
You mentioned coming through Fort Bragg. Everybody got taught infantry tactics, and
Yeah.
that was the basis for your training as a soldier.
Right.
What was your professional job as a soldier?
Well, I would train in operation. They sent me to school to operate field laundry. To operate their laundry. All right. But I went through the motion there at Fort Lee, Virginia. There, I went through it. All right, went through it. All right. Get to Vietnam. When I first got situated there, before I got to Camp Baxter, up in Da Nang, I seen the laundries, went by it. That's the only thing I seen, that laundry. So what we done was following up on this command here, the transportation company. I don't know why they call it transportation. We fell up on checking cargo on and off the ship. Ammo, whatever it need to be coming off that ship, a lot of ammo and stuff coming off those ships coming in and out. But other than that, we pulled guard duty, we was alert, we run patrol, and we had weapons with us at all time. 24/7. That M16 with M to me. I didn't turn it back in until I got ready to leave. And some of the time where I have a 45 in an M16. Uh, those your baby, you kept them clean and everything. And like I said, Vietnam didn't have no communication. The lack of communication. Today's technology, we didn't have all of that, cell phones and stuff like that. We had to rely on purely the communication that was at hand at that time.
And you mentioned a couple of times now that you pulled guard and you were on the outsides of Camp Baxter.
You're right. We put guarded up in a 50-foot tower. It had to be a minimum of 2 peoples there, 2 to 3 peoples there, pulling guard duty. 2 people had to be awoke at all time. 2 people. Some of the towers had an M60. You had to be alert. 1 sleeping or supposed to be sleep down. 2 up. 1 watching for each other. The enemies will be trying to penetrate the compound. It's one no safe place there in Vietnam. During the time frame, I was there in 70, 71, and Red Eye Satellite Defense was 68 and 69, 68, 67, 68. And every year when they're approaching that time, Teddy Defense, they always get heavy alert and geared up for, they're afraid they're going to happen again and stuff. And
so you're on high alert during the upcoming months of the anniversaries or the beginning of the year with the Tet Offensive.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In pulling guard duty in those towers and in that high alert time, you mentioned earlier that they would walk and bracketed in the indirect fire, the rockets and stuff on your positions.
Yes, they walked that out. We had to be at, we said we in our barracks or hooch and huts, and they walk them rockets, and then you had to get in your bag. That's what Charlie would do. He would walk them rockets in, hoping he could get up with you, hoping he got his target. He'll try walking them in on you. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You go ahead. I'm sorry.
I seen a helicopter go straight up in the helicopter like this. Go straight up. Come down. I seen a lot in Vietnam. I seen a lot of people get killed there. I was with a brother. We call everybody our brothers there in Vietnam. And I was with a brother that got killed all night on the compound there. I was with him all night. Sometimes I have nightmares. I stayed there with him all night till they finally got somebody there to get him. Mm-hmm. Vietnam was like no other place as a young man, just out of high school. Hadn't seen no much. It wasn't for TVs and reading. You'll be locked out of the world. You get a chance to see a lot of things and experience stuff over there that no other one your age group would experience in Vietnam.
You mentioned...
Go ahead.
You can go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like, they say it wasn't no safe according to reading material, they said that Cameron Bay should been one of the safest places in Vietnam because it was surrounded by water, I believe. And I left from Cameron Bay coming back to the state. I had to mention that, but according to my knowledge, it wasn't a safe place in Vietnam to say, "Oh, you had it made there." No, you didn't have no safe place, safe zone, safe haven. I went out in the field out there pushing Charlie every day, but yet and still the situation what I was put in, it was just as worse. It was just the worst. Cause we had that when you on guard duty, that ain't nothing to play with. It just like you got there to train up. You're training it up. This the real world now. You can easily get killed or get hurt in them towers. If you say if y'all go to sleep, side to go to sleep, ain't nobody coming in here. See, that's the weak part. That child gonna penetrate you. He gonna kill you. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Payne, if I can take us back just a little bit, and you're speaking now about the importance of pulling guard and keeping Camp Baxter safe for all the people that are in there. And you mentioned one specific instance where the person that was on guard duty with you was killed in action.
He wasn't on guard duty,
Okay.
but he got killed on that compound.
Mm-hmm.
On that compound.
And you were there with him.
I was there with him there. Throughout the ordeal, I stayed with him. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, I can see it. Sometime at my age, I'll be 75. I can forget things, forget where I laid my keys at this minute, but I can remember that like it was yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's seeing a good friend of yours, seeing life leaving him, leaving his body. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you had to grow up quick, fast, in a hurry. You had very little room to make mistakes. I feel like God wanted me to make it back from Vietnam so I could tell my story.
Hmm.
And I had a next door neighbor raised up. He was without a mother. My mama helped raise him. He had a brother, and he was in and out of our house like one of my brothers, like my brother. And we graduated from school together. I went in the military before him, and I found out after about 3 or 4 months, 5 months or more, as I got back, I know he had went into the military, got drafted like I did. And they said, heard about so-and-so? I thought maybe he done come back home. Oh, yeah. He got killed over there. They were flying the coast of Vietnam. He got hit in a helicopter. That tore me apart. I spoke at his funeral, and that's tore me apart.
Did you know a lot of people from the Opelika community who was drafted and served in Vietnam?
Yes, I know a lot of them. After I got back, I identified a lot of people that served in Vietnam. Beyond Vietnam was like no other. It destroyed families, and I said to my prayed all the time when I was there that I make it back. And I made it back from there. And my early days, can I just say what I want to say?
Yes, sir.
In my early days, returning from Vietnam, my television was on Channel 3, CBS. 60 Minutes was on. Mike Wallace was interviewing Secretary of Defense McNamara. McNamara told Mike Wallace Vietnam was a suicide mission. They didn't anticipate on anyone making it out of Vietnam. Yeah, said the Congress could never. They always said conflict. Vietnam was a war. Vietnam was a war. It wasn't a conflict. Congress could never get together. They lost more people since the war than during the war. Like you said yesterday, it's probably 20,000 or so people's veterans that left from Vietnam. Today, statistical wise, I'll be 75 in July. I consider one of the youngest real foot soldiers from the Vietnam, real foot soldiers. I ain't talking about the one that came in and left in 73. Everything was basically, all that good fighting and stuff was sold down. I'm one of the youngest soldiers that was in Vietnam, was there in the midst of all of it.
You talked about when you came home from Vietnam and you saw McNamara on TV, and you had a visual response to that statement when you said it.
Yes, man, I said, wow. Saying that, wasn't anticipating on anyone, the suicide mission. See, McNamara knows something. See, that we shouldn't have never been there. They would expect nobody. They're sending us in there as soldiers, grabbing them and sending them there. What expect them in those? Guinea pigs, and expect none of. Then I hear guys, when I get back later on with PhDs, say, you know you shouldn't have never been in Vietnam. We supposed to have been in Vietnam, the United States, in the early years as advisor. That's all. But it escalated. Politics got in it. We got caught up in that. Mm-hmm.
How did you reflect early on Vietnam after you got back, and how has that changed over the years? The Vietnam War and your times there.
Like I always refer to, God wanted me to be a survivor out of Vietnam so I can tell the story. That's the only way I can see it. Mm-hmm. It can't come up no other way. It's God plan. It's in the God plan that I make it out of there. And it's been God plan from the day I left Vietnam. My mindset tried to stay focused throughout the years and live a positive life. That's my mindset. And God was always there through the good and bad to see me here to get to this point in life.
We talked about we're talking about you coming home. How was your reception when you came home?
Oh man. We came home when I left my unit, got orders, sent me down to Cameron Bay so I can be processed to come back to the States. And when we got to Cameron Bay, and finally, after about a week or so, or 2 weeks, I finally got on a plane to be manifest back to the States. And when we got back on this plane to the States, we landed at SeaTac, I want to say, an airport somewhere there in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And we boarded a plane. We boarded a bus from there to Fort Lewis, Fort Lewis, Washington. And we had someone to represent us from the Secretary of State, from the Secretary office, the Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger office, to welcome them home. And from there, we were processed and put on some uniforms and stuff to get ready to come home. Mm-hmm.
How was your reception back?
The reception was at home or back when I got in the States?
Both, whichever one you remember.
The reception, I remember I was in Atlanta waiting to get a bus out of there that came into the airport, and I was going to be bused home to Atlanta Airport. And I went to the bus station, and I was processed to come home. And then I got home that morning, the next day. And you done made it home. Cab driver, you done made it home. I know you're glad to be here. Everything looked a little different. It wasn't no warm reception, just people who I know or run into at the time were glad to see me, pretty much.
How did the Auburn-Opelika area change within that year?
During that time?
Yes, sir.
Well, they didn't care nothing. They wanted about helping the society. There wasn't nothing about helping a veteran just got back from Vietnam. Wasn't interested in that. They want all that, Thing was, it wasn't about coffee. You done been to Vietnam. You're supposed to make you better than everybody else. It's just that you had to get into society and fit in where you could fit in. Based on the only time that I felt like I'm doing a military base, because you coming from during that time frame, you coming from a profile unit or something, they accepted you. You well accepted, in the military. Come from Vietnam, period. That's put a plus by you. You survive with Vietnam in the military. That's a plus. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier when you got to Vietnam, it was a lonely feeling. You were by yourself.
Yeah, it's just like the football player. They go in there, they don't know these guys, but you go in there you being grafted, or you going to college to play football. You don't know nobody, but you got to get in and you got to fit in with the people there. You got to be able to speak up, and all of y'all become brothers. You know, everybody there in Vietnam that I was with, all was together. It didn't show no prejudice. It wasn't no room for that in there. No prejudice there in Vietnam. You couldn't show it. You call everybody helping each other. You know, we trying to survive. We all us trying to survive.
And you talk about there was no prejudices while you were in the military, and there was none experienced in Vietnam.
Vietnam, period. I was other places side Vietnam, but Vietnam wasn't no room for that. If you was, they hid it. They hid it. Cause stuff like that can get me hurt or get you hurt or whatever. You know, during the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And all of us was together. We supported everybody. We supported everybody. Everybody covered our back. I covered their back in Vietnam.
And once you returned home to Opelika, did you have this feeling of loneliness, of trying to reintegrate into society, into maybe just trying to find your own, or did you come right back into society and adjust pretty well? Was there any transition period there, and do you remember that at all?
Well, I want to move forward, and during my transition period, I could see that some of the peoples that I knew were stagnated and wasn't trying to help themselves, and so I had to rely on my instinct and move forward on my own, and help my family best I can, my mother, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Cause time to, I'm pretty sure my mama was going through some hard times, so I had to reach out because she had to help raise me from a time I was on this earth until I got to high school. So I had to try to reach back out. Had to. Didn't have no other choice. And continue to move on with my life and stay focused.
What did you do when you returned home to Opelika, job wise?
I returned home to Opelika. I after I spent I spent time my time was spent in the reserve component after Vietnam. Later I was medical retired
Hmm.
from Vietnam, and I worked and helped my mother and try to stay focused, stayed focused. Cause anytime that military always was the reflection of Vietnam, cause that's where it's all started at in Vietnam, at Fort Bragg in Vietnam. And I thank God that I serve now, today. I thank God. See, I believe it's God's intent for you to go through a whole lot and doing a whole lot so you can understand Him and understand the Bible better. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you were medically retired.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind sharing the conditions in which you were medically retired and how that came about, and you related it back to your experiences in Vietnam?
My experience, first of all, little did I know during the experience of my buddy getting killed over there, that set the groundwork for this PTSD and all that stuff I had went through and doing, and I'm able to cope with it today. I done had a lot of classes, a lot of sections, vet to vet classes, and a lot of stuff to learn to deal with it. I go in places now. I don't like to be in big crowds all at certain time. I always sit with my back to the wall if I'm in the church or whatever. I goes, but I don't really don't like crowd to be in a crowd every day. But I like the event yesterday. I was something I geared up for. By going through a lot of classes early on, helped me cope with a lot of stuff. And I don't like to be in like crowds and stuff. Hmm.
So the lasting effects of Vietnam are still with you 50 years later.
Yeah. Hmm. But I'm learning learning. I done learned to live with a lot of it. To learn to live with it.
How was that experience in the process of learning to live with this?
It wasn't easy because there was something that I prayed to God to help me with, and He did. It wasn't easy. You got to. It's just like I said. It's just like a alcoholic or drug addict. Before you can help them, they got to want it. And it's something that I wanted to help with. That's why I was in classes early. I used to spend 2 or 3 times a week in class every other day for hours at a time, learning to cope with different situations. Hearing other people talk about how they got over it, how they overcome this situation. By it is in a group session that can help you like that.
You mentioned that you had to want it.
Yeah.
And that was your first step of going through this rehabilitation and this process.
Right.
Was there a specific moment when you said, I need it, I want it, I want that help?
I always had, because I want to continue to be in the limelight in the military wise and be around peoples and stuff, but I wanted to know how to cope with it. See, the Army Approach program, they program you and deprogramming you what's on their mind. They want to get you there. They just want to get you there in mindset. But deprogramming you wasn't on, that wasn't a problem.
Do you think that was the cause of some Vietnam veterans returning home and resorting to, or just having a tougher transition and resorting to not seeking help right away?
Yes, yes. Yeah. I seen a lot of stuff before I went into the military. I seen a lot of brothers come back like that and stuff. See, they used to sit, I know the guy they said sit with a broom or a broomstick in the hand, like he on guard duty, sitting. They called it shell shot during that time frame in the 60s, the 60s and early 70s, shell shot. Later they dressed it up, PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome. And that's all it is. And see, they got these brothers, they were programmed for a mission, but they never brought them down. Then they started to try to work with the classes and stuff, and which was good, and bringing psychologists to help with it, setting up the group section. That's the best thing they could have did, the group section. Because you listen to a psychologist, that he just went to school and school trained and he never been there, but he been school trained and watched videos and read books. But if he's heads up a group of facilitators that done been there and sit in with him, that can help him know how to treat you and help you more. Cause in a group section, people they done been where you been, and they telling the story how to deal with it. And they brothers, they bonded now. I know a lot of them still go in group section. They goes out to eat, something they do every day, or every other day, or once a month, or twice a month. And it's good to have a camaraderie like that in your life, to help you cope with things. Cause it ain't easy. It's not easy.
After your return to Vietnam, you decided to stay in the military service.
Right.
What weighed in on that decision after experiencing warfare and experiencing your time in Vietnam?
I always wanted to support my country. I just wanted to do that. And just be part of me. But I wanted to help. And I got to help. Thank God. And I learned to cope with situations.
How long did you serve for after your return from Vietnam?
I retired, medical retired. I remember the best. That's the 9/11. 9/11. Cause the medical stuff was in my record. I was pretty much supposed to retire. I was supposed to start cause for 9/11. 9/11. What happened in 9/11? Then they put in the regulations saying that anyone that had medical stuff in their medical record like that, like I had, could be no longer be deployed. So that means that you had to. They put an offer on the table for me from Fort Sam, Houston, medical facility, with a full retirement offer for that day, for that weekend, for that week. Right after 9/11, they put an offer on the table for me to accept. If I was challenged that I could possibly lose, I didn't challenge it.
So this is 2001
Yeah.
when you're getting benefits from the Veterans Affairs,
Mm-hmm.
an offer of benefits from the Veterans Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
When did you end your service in the reserve, and how long was that period in between those times?
That was from it was from 2000 from 73.
So you got out of the reserves in 1973.
So I came from Vietnam in 71, 72. I was out, and I went in the reserve because right before 73, I was out for a second. Then I went into the reserve components.
And how long did you serve in the reserve component?
Off and on, I served up until 9/11.
Okay, so you did serve up until 9/11 in the reserves, off and
Right.
on. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So decades of service
Right.
in the reserves.
And just come for the love for the military.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
And you fully medically retired in 2001.
Yeah.
And you've been retired since then.
Mm-hmm.
What unit of the U.S. Army Reserves did you serve with? Was it all local here within the Auburn area or within the state of Alabama?
In the state of Alabama.
Yes, sir.
I served up in the 167 Detachment, 200 M2 MMC unit there in Birmingham.
And what was some of your duty positions and maybe ranks and opportunities that you were able to serve?
E6. E6. I was in supplies. What is this? 92 Alpha. Most of the supplies.
Yes, sir. And you've always lived here in the Auburn-Opelika area.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And one thing we haven't gotten to is your family.
Yes.
Are you currently married?
Currently married. I've been married 2 times. I'm married. Now my wife, I got 4 children. Lives in Opelika. Both of us are retired. We got 2. Let's see. We got 3 boys and a girl. My wife had 2 children from her previous marriage. I had 2 children from mine before I got married to her. And so we're all one big happy family.
Speaking of big happy families and going back to your time, you said you knew a lot of service members who served in Vietnam and throughout your time in the reserves. Do you keep in touch with any of those fellow service members that you may have served in Vietnam with or during your time in the reserve?
I sees a lot of them from time to time that served in the reserve with me over the years, yes. Like my friend James Hughley that was with me yesterday, he's a little older than I am, but he served in Vietnam and before I did, and we became friends with some organizations together, different organizations together. And
you've mentioned yesterday a couple of times. Can you tell us about yesterday? You went to an event that was a wreath laying ceremony for the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War here in Auburn. Can you tell me about that day and reflecting back on 50 years? What was kind of going through your mind yesterday?
Yesterday, what was going through my mind, it brought back Vietnam to me, sitting there during the event memorial celebration. It took me back to Vietnam and everything, being around so many comrades that served in that during that time frame or supported the theater during that time frame. It just took me back, and I was able to cope with that, and it just took me back. And but a lot of times now I enjoy going back to that. Me and another Vietnam veteran, was planning to go one day back to that area down. It's a tourist site over there. We're planning to go back there and maybe go to Da Nang and different places where he served, somewhere close by. Just go.
Is that something you still would like to do?
Yeah.
And what do you think you would get from that?
Well, just to see, and I know my mind will go back to that area when I was 18 and 19 years old, and just the thought of just being there back on that soil.
Do you think the way you felt about being in Vietnam and fighting the enemy, whether it's the North Vietnamese army, how did you feel about them at the time? And do you think that's changed over the past 50 years?
I was trained to, during that time frame, to kill or be killed, the enemy. And now my point of view is it's a little different now. As I get older and out of the military, said that's what during wartime, and that's what it be. And I like to leave it. I won't try to leave it there, and try to move forward. But if you continue to stay there, you can't move forward. And that's what I had to do. I had to do a lot of things, even though it's still there. I had to move forward, get past all that happened there in Vietnam.
Is there any life lessons you learned from your military service that's carried forward with you past into your I'll say your civilian life after 9/11 when you medically retired from the U.S. Army Reserves?
As you look back on your military career, you said that was during what was going on that time frame in your life, and you want to try to get past it, but you do get past that, but it's still part of it's still there, in order for you to move forward into the future more. And I'm glad that I went through that during my life and made it out of that. It's made me. I believe it. I know it helped make me a better person and understand. Like looking back at World War II and Korea veterans and stuff like that, and you can only say thank you for your service, sir or ma'am, and I'm glad that God wanted me to go through it. I'm always going to refer that God wanted me to go through what I went through so I could tell the story.
And has your military service impacted your feelings about war in general?
Well, I know it's going to always be war somewhere because they going to always be the conflict where people's countries not getting along and they're going to get a war up. It's going to be all like in the Middle East. It's always will be war and torment there. The Bible speaks of it. It's never could be peace there because they fighting for birthrights and stuff. And let me see, I'm going to tell you this way. Political, they they want peace there in them area. Biblical is not can never be peace in a lot of areas, but we wars always, and I don't have a bitter for it. I prefer not for other kids to go through what I do, had to endure, but it's still there. We have to be on alert for that as possible as it can happen. That we on the coast or somewhere in the sea around the world with ships 24/7. Cause anytime a war may break out, these countries, Russia, China, mm-hmm, North Korea, places. I had buddies of mine graduate with me up on the DMZ, right across the DMZ, that's North Korea. They facing each other, looking at each other. War can break out any time. War is serious. It could be death. It can be failure.
Mr. Payne, as we start to conclude this interview session, is there a message that you would like to give to future generations who will hear this interview?
I would like to say to the people that will hear my interview that the reason that I'm here today, part of God wanted me to be here to tell the story. One of the few left from the Vietnam era to tell the story. God wanted me here to tell the story.
And is there anything else that we haven't covered in this interview that you'd like to speak about? Something I just may not have asked you about?
I believe that pretty much sums it up.
Mr. Payne, it's been a complete honor here to speak with you today, and I look forward to sharing your story and putting it out there. Thank you so much, Mr. Payne.
Thank you. I hope I did okay.